I work with a lot of business owners that are very powerful individuals. And they're like, it's not about me. No, the business is all about me. So what do you say when this mindset shift is it's not about you? What does that mean to you? Like, how can we understand that a little bit better?
So it's the foundation for all things leadership. Everything leadership begins with, I call this rule number one of leadership. It's not about you. It's not about your solutions. It's not about your way of doing things. It's not about you rescuing everything. And it's not about your ego. The critical thing to recognize is about them. If you want to run a lifestyle business where it's just you doing stuff, go for it. Absolutely. But if you're looking to build something that's bigger than that, and ultimately looking to exit at some point with a business that has a decent valuation, then the business has to have a life beyond you in any scenario. And the critical thing to recognize with rule number one is that it gets across to us the message that it's not actually your job to deliver the result. And again, I'm not saying results aren't important, but the critical mindset shift that needs to take place in a leader's thinking is it's not your job to deliver the result. Your job is delivering the team who deliver the result. And it's a subtle mindset shift, but it's an incredibly important one, because until you get to that point, then anything leadership, which is about strengthening and building a better and a more effective team and getting them pointing in the right direction and getting them working together, all of that stuff, it ends up being like an extracurricular activity that you squeeze in at the end of the day, maybe if you have time. And let's be clear, because you're doing all of the other stuff to get the result over the line, you never do have time. So you end up with a team that is nowhere near where you want them to be. You're constantly having to plug all of the gaps, and it becomes a never-ending cycle. You're like the crackerjack kid trying to hold it all together with all of this stuff. You've got a team who've either got, there's two extreme possibilities. They've either got a huge amount of capacity and you're not accessing it, or they're running around completely ragged, hating what they're doing because you're not giving them any clarity. You're half giving them stuff to do. Or when you ask them to do something and you haven't actually explained clearly what it is you want, and they come back and it's not what you wanted, you just say, no, go away and do something else. I worked with a client once, and they put this challenge back to some of their senior management, and they called it, bring me another rock. So they'll come along with a rock and they'll say, no, not that rock, bring me another rock. And you can create this cycle of either utter exhaustion and frustration in your team where it feels like it's just so pointless, or you're in the scenario where they've got shed loads of time on their hands. And quite frankly, the only thing that's worse than too much to do is not enough to do. So in terms of engagement and performance, it still has the same end result. And it's all totally and utterly dependent upon you. And until we create this shift where we realize, actually, my job is delivering the team. For example, we've all hit a scenario where there's a crisis that hits and we need to roll up our sleeves and we need to jump down there in the trenches with the team. I am not against that. I'm not saying we should be aloof from the team when times are hard. However, if you are always the one in the trenches with the team, who's working out how to get out of the trenches? Nobody. And that's your job. That's nobody else's job. That's your job. And if you're not doing that, you think you're helping the team, and all you're doing is failing to do what really matters. And therefore, the whole situation is perpetuated again and again and again. And that's the key point here. You've got to create that shift in your thinking. It's not something you squeeze in at the end of the day. That's what your job is. And the great thing about rule number one is there's all sorts of facets that come from this. So take, for example, imposter syndrome, which it doesn't matter how effective a founder you're dealing with, everybody's struggling with that in one way or another. Well, the great thing about rule number one, it's not about you, is we think people are thinking about what we're doing and analyzing it and criticizing it all the time. And the bottom line is they've got their own stuff going on. They're not thinking about us. Okay, it's not about you. Okay. Right. You barely feature or sit in their scheme of things and in their bandwidth of everything that's going on. They're not thinking about, well, she didn't do a very good job of that, did she? Or that was a bit rubbish. I'm not sure about that presentation. None of those things are going on. They've got all of their own stuff cracking on, spinning around in their heads. And yet we can constantly end up, leaders can constantly end up second guessing themselves. But rule number one is really empowering. Rule number one also says, good news, you don't have to have all of the answers. Now, that's actually really, really powerful. It doesn't only just take a whole lot of pressure off you. It's okay to rock up and say, I don't know the answer to this one. I can see partial answers, but not the whole thing, because the most enlightened leaders know that the world is too complex for one person to have all of the answers. Right. The best leaders will draw it together from a range of different sources. That's one of the great reasons you have a team, because you've got a whole range of different perspectives that you can pull together. That's if, of course, you've recruited a team with different perspectives to you. And then you can draw that together and create an overall solution. So there's so many angles we could look at with rule number 1,